Awesome. Super sick. Starship Flight 5 will launch on Sunday, much earlier than the FAA's previous declaration. So does the FAA agree? Find out everything in Techmap's Today episode. The dream is coming closer than ever to reality. We probably won't have to wait until after the 2024 U.S. presidential election to hear about FAA approval for Starship Flight 5. It will happen much sooner than you can expect. Wow, no kidding. See this tweet from SpaceX on October 7th after its Falcon 9 rocket successfully launched the important ESA Hera mission, ahead of the FAA officially authorizing Falcon 9 to return to regular operations. Starship's fifth flight test is preparing to launch as soon as October 13th, pending regulatory approval. So it means that Starship Flight 5 will be launching this weekend, doesn't it? If you're still skeptical, Elon Musk will confirm it. Launch could be as soon as Sunday. To add to the certainty, SpaceX updated it on its website, saying Starship's fifth flight test could launch as soon as October 13th, pending regulatory approval. A live webcast of the flight test will begin about 30 minutes before liftoff, which you can watch here and on SpaceX. You can also watch the webcast on the new XTV app. The launch window will open as early as 7 a.m. CT, as is the case with all developmental testing. The schedule is dynamic and likely to change, so be sure to stay tuned to our X account for updates. SpaceX also announced a schedule of road closures for flight testing, with a primary date of October 13th from 12 a.m. to 2 p.m., and the alternative days, including October 14th and 15th, each from 12 a.m. to 2 p.m. Regarding this, many people expressed high confidence in the feasibility of SpaceX's timeline. As usual, SpaceX never announces anything on its official account and website without certainty, or at least the authenticity of information must be high. Even the FAA's updated statement no longer mentions a late November target date, even though it doesn't directly agree with SpaceX's timeline. The FAA will make a licensing determination once SpaceX has met all licensing requirements, they wrote. This is different from the FAA's statement on October 2nd, speaking out to reaffirms that the launch date of no earlier than November remains in place. This aims in response to the notice to mariners for Starship Flight 5, published on the same day, saying that the rocket launch operations scheduled near Boca Chica, Texas, will operate at the primary date of October 12th, 2024, and backup dates listed for October 13th, 18, and 19 from 7 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. and October 14th to 17 from 7 a.m. to 8:40 a.m. This suggests a potential launch window spanning about a week, with October 12th as the primary target. Later that same day, an X account called Space Sudoer posted a photo showing reservations for NASA's WB-57 aircraft from October 13th to October 27th. This matches the schedule in the U.S. Coast Guard notice to mariners. At that time, a popular argument was that these launch dates were not yet published by the FAA. Without FAA approval, the anticipated launch is still uncertain. Bear in mind, ahead of Starship Flight 2, SpaceX and the FAA were in a heated battle over speeding up the FAA's launch licensing progress for Starship test flight. In my opinion, the tension at that time was no less than what we have seen today, as the situation worsened, threatening to push the launch date to next year. Out of the blue, SpaceX fired the public up by circling a date on the calendar. Starship is preparing to launch as early as November 17th, pending final regulatory approval, the company said on X, coming with a cool video. Finally, Starship launched a second time on November 18th, delayed a day to replace the grid fin actuator on the booster. In addition, this isn't the first time Elon Musk has had to deal with the FAA and its bureaucracy. Given years of experience dealing with sanctions and regulations, the billionaire is well aware of the consequences of his every action. As a man who became rich not through impulsiveness, he was wise enough to assess the current situation and then make smart moves. So how about you? Do you believe that Starship Flight 5 will be launching on Sunday? Let's comment "Go Starship Flight 5" in the comment section below. If true, this would be an exciting development, especially since preparations for Flight 5 are nearly complete. SpaceX says the rocket has been ready to fly since early August. Activity surrounding the full-stack B-12 and S-30 picked up on October 7th when SpaceX teams performed another partial tanking test as part of the ongoing preparations for Flight 5 of Starship. At midnight of the same day, SpaceX conducted a double water deluge test, presumably simulating the two phases on launch day, one for the launch itself and one for booster landing. One day later, S-30 was destacked from B-12 for potentially final pre-flight preparations, including FTS Flight Termination System Explosives installation. Just several hours after destacking, media captured a photo that may show the FTS installation underway. The Mechazilla's chopsticks, which will be catching the Super Heavy in the upcoming flight, have experienced several tests, and most recently the test of trolling with the structural weights. As early as the afternoon of October 4th, two clusters of orange bags appeared and hung on the two arms. Each cluster had 3 bags filled with water to simulate the mass of the rocket. By late afternoon, each side had 2 100-ton bags and 1 50-ton bag, creating a total mass of up to 500 tons, suitable for testing chopsticks' efficiency in catching the Super Heavy booster. When returning for a catch, Super Heavy's dry mass is 200 tons, and with some remaining fuel and movement impact, the total mass could approach 500 tons. During the test, Chopstick moved slightly under the impact, but everything remained stable. This successful test once again demonstrated Chopstick's capability. Subsequently, Elon Musk posted an ironic saying targeted at the FAA as quoted, "Just offering FAA News some tea. The 5th flight test of Starship will aim to take another step towards full and rapid reusability. The primary objectives will be attempting the first ever return to the launch site and catching the Super Heavy booster and another Starship re-entry and landing burn, aiming for an on-target splashdown of Starship in the Indian Ocean. To make that possible, SpaceX said, extensive upgrades ahead of this flight test have been made to hardware and software across Super Heavy, Starship, and the launch and catch tower infrastructure at Starbase. SpaceX engineers have spent years preparing and months testing for the booster catch attempt, with technicians pouring tens of thousands of hours into building the infrastructure to maximize our chances for success. The company said they accept no compromises when it comes to ensuring the safety of the public and our team, and the return will only be attempted if conditions are right. Thousands of distinct vehicle and pad criteria must be met prior to a return and catch attempt of the Super Heavy booster, which will require healthy systems on the booster and tower and a manual command from the mission's flight director. If this command is not sent prior to the completion of the boost back burn, or if automated health checks show unacceptable conditions with Super Heavy or the tower, the booster will default to a trajectory that takes it to a landing burn and soft splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico. Elon Musk excitedly confirmed that on X, as quoted exactly. Simultaneously, he emphasized that Starship's operational launch tower would take charge of this special mission if all systems are working well. During the catch, the returning booster will slow down from supersonic speeds, resulting in audible sonic booms in the area around the landing zone. Generally, the only impact to those in the surrounding area of a sonic boom is the brief thunder-like noise, with variables like weather and distance from the return site determining the magnitude experienced by observers. Starship will fly a similar trajectory as the previous flight test, with splashdown targeted in the Indian Ocean. This flight path does not require a deorbit burn for re-entry, maximizing public safety while still providing the opportunity to meet SpaceX's primary objective of a controlled re-entry and soft water landing of Starship. One of the key upgrades on Starship ahead of the flight was a complete rework of its heat shield, with SpaceX technicians spending more than 12,000 hours replacing the entire thermal protection system with newer generation tiles, a backup ablative layer, and additional protections between the flap structures. This massive effort, along with updates to the ship's operations and software for re-entry and landing burn, will look to improve upon the previous flight and bring Starship to a soft splashdown at the target area in the Indian Ocean. With each flight building on the learnings from the last, testing improvements in hardware and operations across every facet of Starship, SpaceX is on the verge of demonstrating techniques fundamental to Starship's fully and rapidly reusable design. By continuing to push its hardware in a flight environment, and doing so as safely and frequently as possible, the company will rapidly bring Starship online and revolutionize humanity's ability to access space. SpaceX, well known for its ambitious goals and rapid development of reusable rocket technology, has been eagerly preparing for Starship Flight 5, the crucial milestone in the Starship program. The super rocket's fifth flight will mark the first time it has been caught by Mechazilla, representing a bold step forward in the rocket's goal of full reusability. This will pave the way for revolutionizing space travel by dramatically reducing costs and increasing accessibility. With its immense payload capacity and ability to land on celestial bodies, Starship has the potential to open up new frontiers in space and pave the way for human missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. However, regulatory challenges and environmental concerns are always huge obstacles for SpaceX on its way. In September, the company received a launch license date estimate of late November from the FAA, a more than 2-month delay from the previously communicated date of mid-September. This delay wasn't based on a new safety concern, but instead driven by superfluous environmental analysis, largely driven by political motivations. This FAA movement caused a wave of strong protests from the space community. SpaceX is not just Elon Musk's. In fact, he only owns about 40% of the company's shares. For that reason, the FAA targeting Elon Musk through SpaceX is a wrong strategy, since, in fact, they are actually attacking unrelated people who work in SpaceX, such as Kathy Luters, Gwynne Shotwell, Mark Juncosa, and thousands of other workers. Furthermore, it also impacts the entire U.S. aerospace industry, as SpaceX has a monopoly in this field, responsible for putting the U.S. ahead of China in the space race. It explains why Gwynne Shotwell, who inherently took place quietly behind the scenes at SpaceX, ultimately speaks out to defend SpaceX and its space programs against unfounded accusations at a congressional hearing with the U.S. House Committee.
But for sure, we want to continue to enhance regulatory efficiency so that regulation does not hold back technology and innovation. This is not an issue for our competitors overseas. It is an issue in the United States. Less so in Texas.
She hints at the recent sanctions that the U.S. federal agency has imposed on SpaceX. The FAA's first attack was on August 12th, when it suddenly announced postponement of hearings on an environmental review linked to SpaceX's plans to increase the number of Starship launches from its South Texas facility. It goes after CNBC's controversial article regarding SpaceX's environmental issues. The plot thickens as on September 12th, SpaceX received a Starship Flight 5 launch license date estimate of late November from the FAA, threatening seriously to the company's plans. FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker, during a September 24th hearing, explained that Starship faces further delays because SpaceX filed a launch application without disclosing it was in violation of Texas law. The Environmental Protection Agency said the company violated the Clean Water Act by failing to contain a liquid oxygen spill at its Starbase launch pad, prompting a $150,000 fine. SpaceX denied that it violated any laws at Starbase, but ate the fine to avoid any consequences. SpaceX also faces more than $630,000 in proposed fines from the FAA for violating its launch license during the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launches in 2023. Whitaker said the fines are unrelated to the Flight 5 setback, but the agency claims the company's unauthorized use of a new control room and fuel farm regarding those launches raised safety concerns. Musk, in response, said SpaceX will fight the penalties in court. Of course, the $100,000 fines are not a big deal for SpaceX. It looks like a heavy blow to the company instead, whereas it is ramping up its progress towards the goal. Shotwell expressed concerns that government bureaucracy is hindering progress, especially as SpaceX strives to continue launching its massive Starship from South Texas, expand its Starlink satellite internet operations in Bastrop, and enhance engine testing at the McGregor site.
We can build a rocket and get it prepared for launch faster than we can get the bureaucracy to approve us to launch.
Only by addressing these concerns can businesses thrive. As Shotwell stated,
you will probably enhance the regulatory environment, and there's just a caution that you really want to make sure that regulation doesn't impede progress.
Shotwell's words at the September 26th hearing actually worked, as Starship Flight 5 progress is currently looking positive. SpaceX, on October 7th, officially announced that Starship's fifth flight test will launch on Sunday, October 13th, much sooner than November, as the FAA previously declared. Starship's fifth flight test is preparing to launch as soon as October 13th, pending regulatory approval. Although the FAA has not confirmed that, in its updated statement, it no longer mentions a late November target date. It can be said that what she said at hearing this time all stemmed from her deep love for Texas, home to Starbase, which she describes as a, quote, a one-of-a-kind facility to manufacture, test, and launch the most advanced rockets on the planet there.
Texas, which I call my home office now. Since then, we've established state-of-the-art facilities, development, test, and launch facilities. We've improved both in McGregor, and we've developed these facilities down in Starbase at Boca Chica, Texas.
Shotwell also emphasized the importance of SpaceX's missions and the company's work in Texas, all of which aim to advance humanity to new heights.
At Starbase, we are paving the way for humanity to be truly spacefaring and a multiplanetary species. I know that might sound crazy. It sounded crazy to me when I joined the company over 20 years ago, but I really am committed to this.
So how about you? Do you agree that Gwynne Shotwell contributed a lot to SpaceX's victory over the FAA and launching Starship Flight 5 sooner? Drop a heart icon if you agree. Apparently, this isn't the first time SpaceX representatives have directly raised their concerns regarding the FAA's process with Congress. Last October, SpaceX executive William Gerstenmaier, the company's vice president for build and reliability, delivered the warning to the Senate Subcommittee on Space and Science at a hearing on commercial space regulations. The remarks come as SpaceX was facing an environmental review by the Fish and Wildlife Service and a safety review by the FAA of plans to launch Starship Flight 2. It's a shame when our hardware is ready to fly and we're not able to go fly because of regulations or review, Gerstenmaier said, noting that SpaceX has been ready for a month to launch the next Starship test flight. Licensing, including environmental review, often takes longer than rocket development. This should never happen, and it's only getting worse. He also claimed the regulatory delays have nothing to do with public safety. During the hearing, Gerstenmaier did recommend that the FAA double the staff in the licensing division of its Office of Commercial Space Transportation. In addition, the FAA should be given accelerated hiring authority to draw from the best pool of candidates. Staffing has been a big problem for the FAA for a while, the consequences of which were clearly evident in SpaceX's arduous 2-year journey to get its initial Starship launch license. 500 days is the total of time that the U.S. federal agency spent to review a single launch license application for Starship's maiden flight. As they said, that is the longest the agency has spent on a single launch license application. The FAA explained that extended time was due to the complexity of the application and the size of the vehicle, the largest ever to seek a commercial launch license. That created a strain on the resources available to the agency to both review that application and work on other license applications. Despite SpaceX's efforts to raise the alarm, the FAA's progress on resolving the issue has been slow. Clearly, it is an unacceptable thing. For nearly 2 years, SpaceX has voiced its concerns with the FAA's inability to keep pace with the commercial spaceflight industry. It is clear that the agency lacks the resources to timely review licensing materials, but also focuses its limited resources on areas unrelated to public safety. These distractions continue to directly threaten national priorities and undercut American industry's ability to innovate. There are about nearly 45,000 staff to oversee and manage the national airspace system in the FAA, 3 times SpaceX's workforce of about 13,000 employees. Okay, I know that the FAA's amount of work is very huge, as they are responsible for regulating all aspects of civil aviation in the U.S. However, despite tons of work and limited employees, the FAA still has enough resources to take care of little things on SpaceX's rocket that, are unrelated to public safety. It would be a time bomb for America, and Elon Musk pointed the finger at it directly. America is being smothered by ever larger mountains of irrational regulations from ever more new agencies that serve no purpose apart from the aggrandizement of bureaucrats. After 9 days of landing, the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket finally got the sole ticket to launch the European Space Agency's Hera mission. The launch happened on October 7th at 10:52 a.m. EDT from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in coastal Florida. Hera successfully separated from the upper stage of its Falcon 9 rocket about 1 hour and 16 minutes after liftoff. ESA's Hera spacecraft soared into a cloudy sky above Florida to begin a multi-million-mile trek across the solar system to the binary asteroid system Didymos. It became famous in September 2022 after NASA smacked its DART, Double Asteroid Redirect mission, into Didymos' smaller companion, Dimorphos. That impact altered the orbit of Dimorphos, demonstrating the utility of a planetary defense strategy that could help keep Earth safe from rogue asteroids in the future. Hera will follow up on the DART mission to check on its aftermath. Unlike typical SpaceX launches, the October 7th mission didn't witness the landing of Falcon 9's first stage booster, called B-1061. Due to the additional performance required to deliver the payload to an interplanetary transfer orbit, this mission marks the 23rd and final launch for this Falcon 9 first stage booster. In order to launch Hera on its asteroid mission, SpaceX had to use all the fuel on the Falcon 9 booster for the launch. B-1061 launched 2 crewed missions, Crew 1 and Crew 2, but most launches for this workhorse have been supply runs to the International Space Station and satellites for different space companies and global government operations. Most of its later launches have been done from California. In addition to B-1061's sacrifice, the second stage in this mission will not re-enter. This aims to be in exchange for the FAA's approval for the launch of the Hera mission. The agency said it has determined that the absence of a second stage re-entry for this mission adequately mitigates the primary risk to the public in the event of a reoccurrence of the mishap experienced with the Crew 9 mission. Deorbit burn is a compulsory procedure for a controlled re-entry, but in the Hera mission, the second stage doesn't conduct the deorbit burn, so it would remain in orbit until atmospheric drag gradually pulls it down. Its purpose is to avoid a repeat of the incident on the Crew 9 mission on September 28th, where the Falcon 9's second stage failed to ignite the engine for a standard deorbit burn. The malfunction caused the upper stage to land in the ocean outside its target disposal area. Subsequently, the FAA grounded SpaceX's Falcon 9 fleet and required SpaceX to investigate the root cause. Of course, currently solely the Hera mission is authorized to launch. The FAA is not clearing other Falcon 9 missions where the second stage does a deorbit burn. SpaceX has completed the Crew 9 mishap report and delivered it to the FAA on October 4th. Safety will drive the timeline for the FAA to complete its review of SpaceX's Crew 9 mishap investigation report and when the agency will authorize Falcon 9 to return to regular operations, the U.S. federal agency stated. There may be another reason why the FAA partially eased the ban on SpaceX. It is the European Space Agency. At an October 2nd briefing, ESA officials stressed the need to launch the crucial asteroid mission on Falcon 9 on time. At the ESA briefing, Ian Carnelli, project manager for Hera at ESA, said, "We will be ready to launch on October 7th, he said, pending approval from the FAA to allow Falcon 9 launches to resume. We are basically hoping we get it by Sunday, October 6th. He added that ESA is willing to have Hera be the return-to-flight mission for the Falcon 9, rather than wait for SpaceX to launch one or more missions, such as those carrying Starlink satellites, first. Apparently, ESA doesn't need to wait until October 6th to get the green light from the FAA, since shortly 2 days later, the U.S. agency stated it approved the Falcon 9 for one mission only, the Hera launch. That day coincided with the day SpaceX submitted the Crew 9 mishap report to the FAA. It's fair to say that this is a rare act of agility on the FAA's part in handling paperwork, a far cry from their bureaucracy in working with SpaceX. Another time when the FAA also decided quickly was in the CERT-2 mission of ULA's Vulcan Centaur. Although the mission also hit an anomaly equivalent to what happened to SpaceX's Falcon 9, meaning no public injuries or public property damage, the FAA immediately stated that it determined no investigation is warranted at this time. Meanwhile, Falcon 9's case is totally in contrast. The U.S. federal agency always requires an investigation, or even grounds the rocket's fleet whenever the rocket meets an anomaly. SpaceX's CEO, Elon Musk, is too familiar with the FAA's working style. So this time around, we didn't hear any concerns from SpaceX regarding the Hera mission's timeline. Regarding the Crew 9 incident and investigation, SpaceX has not provided additional details or updates. Elon Musk, even though he is usually active in sharing information about company activities, including during the previous upper stage anomaly in July, has been uncharacteristically silent on the topic of X. In fact, preparations for the October 7th mission continued as usual, despite the fact that the Falcon 9 remains grounded. My guess is that by launching Hera on time, SpaceX may have understood the root cause and fixed the problem on the Falcon 9. "We will resume launches once we have a better understanding of the root cause," they previously said. The bottom line here is always the FAA, but the ESA has solved them all. The most reliable vehicle launcher in the world. For a long time, SpaceX has prided itself on being the most reliable vehicle launcher in the world. This has been proven by the jaw-dropping achievements of the Falcon 9 workhorse rocket and the Falcon family. Rockets from the Falcon 9 family have been launched 389 times over 14 years, resulting in 386 full successes, which translates to a remarkable success rate of 99.23%. Among that, Falcon 9 first-stage boosters landed successfully in 353 of 365 attempts, or 96.7%, with 328 out of 333 at 98.5% for the Falcon 9 Block 5 version. A total of 324 reflights of first-stage boosters have all successfully launched their payloads. On April 12th, SpaceX set a reusability mark with the 20th launch of the Falcon 9's first stage. 2 weeks later, the company tied its rocket reuse record with the 20th launch of a different Falcon 9 booster. Notably, just less than a month ago, the company had made a big bang with the 19th liftoff for the vehicle. Fast forward to October, with the 23rd launch of B-1061, a new record is about to be broken. This is indeed a huge step forward in maximizing rocket reusability, and would further solidify SpaceX's position as a leader in space transportation. Also thanks to its reusability, the Falcon 9 has become the most launched American rocket in history, and it has delivered far more payload mass to orbit than China and the rest of the world combined. In 2023, the total payload mass sent by SpaceX to orbit is 1,195 tons of payloads, accounting for 80% of the globe. As I mentioned above, the low cost is SpaceX's competitive advantage. Launch costs for the Falcon series are capped at $3,000 per kilogram, which is significantly lower than the global commercial spaceflight market average of $10,000 to $20,000 per kilogram. However, instead of settling in his comfort zone, Elon Musk continues to set his sights on conquering bigger milestones: 90% of all Earth's payload to orbit later in 2024. Given SpaceX's current progress pace, the feasibility of that goal is off the table. With incredible achievements and huge ambitions, it would be ridiculous for the FAA administrator to put SpaceX in the same position as a troubled plane maker, Boeing. I think Boeing and SpaceX should have the same oversight. They should all have SMS safety management systems. They should all have whistleblower programs, he said. Michael Whitaker's unlogical statement to Congress during the Transportation Committee hearing on September 24th immediately added to his humiliation. There is a huge gap between SpaceX, the most reliable vehicle launcher, and a troubled plane maker Boeing, who is notorious for plane crashes and spacecraft failures to bring astronauts home. The FAA is on track to reach its target of adding 55 inspectors to Boeing and Spirit AeroSystems facilities by the end of the year, according to Whitaker, who estimated the agency has thus far hired between 40 and 50 inspectors. That doesn't mean SpaceX should be subject to such strict regulations, however. After a long-time delay resulting in paying postponement fees for the Air Force in the summer, ULA finally decided to skip its customer, Sierra Space, to launch its Vulcan Centaur rocket with a dummy payload on October 4th. This is the compulsory second launch of the new generation rocket, called CERT-2, needed to certify the vehicle for carrying national security payloads. Although hailed as a success, it was certainly not a perfect test flight, since one of its solid rocket boosters suffered an anomaly. Frankly, the anomaly in a test flight is not strange because even the most reliable rocket, SpaceX's workhorse Falcon 9, also experienced such incidents. Of course, anomaly means a thing, situation, etc., that is different from what is normal or expected, which is not very close to a total failure of a flight or a serious accident affecting public safety. Fortunately, in the case of the Falcon 9, there is no record of an anomaly that would affect public safety, and Vulcan Centaur's CERT-2 might be similar. Videos from the launch show that there appeared to be material coming off the right side booster, whose plume changed appearance, suggesting damage to the SRB's nozzle. ULA's CEO, Tori Bruno, confirmed the incident was not very close to a failure of the SRB itself, and described it as a nozzle anomaly that did not involve the booster casing or fuel grain, and was compensated for by the booster. But it's just the release of the nozzle. No explosions occurred, he said. Anyway, in the end, the rocket still completes its mission. The FAA seems to agree with that statement, saying because no public injuries or public property damage have been reported, it determined no investigation is warranted at this time. The U.S. federal agency which regulates commercial space launches said it is assessing the operation and will issue an updated statement if the agency determines an investigation is warranted. This reminds me of some of the incidents that happened with the Falcon 9, which made the FAA conduct an investigation or even ground the rocket's fleet. Friendly reminder, Falcon 9 is the cash cow of SpaceX, the arch-rival of EULA. On the night of July 11th, SpaceX's workhorse Falcon 9 rocket suffered a rare anomaly, given that the rocket's upper stage, which was hauling 20 Starlink spacecraft to low Earth orbit, encountered a leak of liquid oxygen, which had serious repercussions for the mission. However, the company affirmed that the failed satellites do not pose a threat to other satellites in orbit or to public safety. As a result, an investigation was required by the FAA, and the fleet was grounded over 2 weeks. In August, the FAA continued to ground Falcon 9 because the rocket failed an attempt to land on a seafaring barge as usual and toppled into the ocean after a fiery touchdown, even though previously it successfully launched a batch of Starlink internet satellites into orbit. The incident involved the failure of the Falcon 9 booster rocket while landing on a drone ship at sea. No public injuries or public property damage have been reported. The FAA is requiring an investigation, an FAA spokesperson said. The chorus of investigation by the FAA doesn't stop here when on September 28th, they again required investigation of anomaly on SpaceX's Crew 9 astronaut launch. The reason is the second stage of the Falcon 9 landed outside the designated danger zone. Clearly, the FAA said no public injuries or public property damage have been reported, but they still required an investigation. Hopefully, at this point, you can see something strange. While like Vulcan's Cert 2, Falcon 9's anomalies don't impact public safety, the FAA delays Falcon 9 but not Vulcan. Not only the public but also SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is confused by the double standard regulatory style of a U.S. federal agency. He responded with 3 question marks to a post by Eric Berger, senior space editor at Ars Technica, on the subject. Some comments also expressed their anger, along with Elon Musk. This is insane. God forbid you have a rocket tip over after landing. That requires an investigation, but an explosion of an SRO on liftoff is no big deal. We're safety driven. But an SRB nozzle literally blowing off isn't something worth investigating? It's thankful it didn't destroy the entire booster, but it's crazy to see a piece of a rocket just unintentionally falling off, and it isn't a FAA concern? Ridiculous. Really? Politics. So, how about you? Are you confused by the FAA's double standard regulatory style in this case? Please comment. 1 in the comment section below. FAA's recent movement comes amid ULA, a 50-50 joint venture between Boeing and Lockheed Martin, is accelerating its pace to clear the new rocket, Vulcan Centaur, for launching military satellites under lucrative Space Force contracts. To certify the rocket, the Space Force required ULA to complete 2 successful Vulcan test flights. The debut test flight of the Vulcan rocket was on January 8th, which sent a commercial lunar lander from Astrobotic on a trajectory toward the moon. The launch in January was nearly perfect. With the test this time, despite the booster malfunction, ULA officials clearly believe the Vulcan rocket did enough for the Space Force to certify it. The success of Vulcan's second certification flight heralds a new age of forward-looking technology committed to meeting the ever-growing requirements of space launch and supporting our nation's assured access to space, Bruno said in a statement. We had an observation on one of our solid rocket boosters, SRBs, that we are reviewing, but we are overall pleased with the rocket's performance and had a bullseye insertion. The Space Force hailed the test flight as a certification milestone. This is a significant achievement for both ULA and an important milestone for the nation's strategic space lift capability, said Brig General Kristen Ponsenhagen, Space Systems Command's Program Executive Officer for Assured Access to Space. The Space Force's partnership with launch companies, such as ULA, is absolutely critical in deploying on-orbit capabilities that protect our national interests. We are already starting to review the performance data from this launch, and we look forward to Vulcan meeting the certification requirements for a range of national security space missions. Vulcan is a program the Air Force is deeply invested in because it serves a strategic purpose by replacing ULA's Atlas V rocket in the national security launch fleet. This transition is mandated by a 2016 law that prohibits the U.S. military from using launch vehicles reliant on the Russian-made RD-180 engine. ULA targeted a reusable type of rocket engine for Vulcan's first stage, and they chose American-made B-4 engines from Blue Origin. So, assuming the FAA conducts an investigation into Vulcan like they did with Falcon that would result in a delay in ULA's work, it would be a huge blow to ULA and the Space Force. Nevertheless, engineers still decided to investigate what happened with one of Vulcan's solid rocket boosters shortly after liftoff, and the timing of the next Vulcan launch, if the Space Force certifies the new rocket, will likely hinge on the outcome of the investigation into the booster anomaly. ULA was formed almost 20 years ago to provide the Defense Department with assured access to space. This defense contractor is one of the Pentagon's key partners in launching national security satellites into space, but currently it is recognized as not being able to meet the needs to counter China and build the arsenal in orbit with a new rocket that ULA has been developing for years. On May 13th, Air Force Assistant Secretary Frank Calvelli sent a letter to the heads of Boeing's and Lockheed Martin's space divisions. By unusually blunt terms, he said, "I am growing concerned with ULA's ability to scale manufacturing of its Vulcan rocket and scale its launch cadence to meet our needs. Currently, there is military satellite capability sitting on the ground due to Vulcan delays," he wrote. In 2020, ULA, along with SpaceX, secured a multi-billion-dollar contract from the U.S. Space Force. The National Security Space Launch Phase 2 contract requires ULA to launch 25 missions by the end of 2027. However, Vulcan's lack of certification has resulted in a backlog of those 25 missions to date. As the Air Force Assistant Secretary said in the letter, 90 days is a needed time for both Boeing and Lockheed Martin Corporation to work together to complete an independent review of ULA's ability in this case.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
It's hard to hold back these words when you take your first glimpse outside the spacecraft under a historical mission, namely Polaris Dawn. This is not the first time billionaire Jared Isaacman has gone into space, but this is the first time he goes out of the capsule and directly sees our planet from space. Not only amateur astronauts like Isaac Mann, but also professional astronauts go through such intense emotions during their first time in space. Seeing our home against the blackness of space is a profound experience that leads to a greater appreciation for Earth and its apparent fragility, and a deep connection to humanity as a whole. Author and space philosopher Frank White calls this the overview effect. NASA astronaut Zena Cardman could have taken a chance to experience the overview effect this year if she had not been bumped from the Crew 9 mission. "I think it was hard not to watch that rocket lift off without thinking, 'That's my rocket and that's my crew,'" Cardman said during NASA's live broadcast of Saturday's Crew 9 launch, as quoted by Space.com. "It makes me feel very connected to this mission." Alongside Cardman, Stephanie Wilson was also intending to get a lift to the International Space Station on board a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft on September 28th. But thanks to Boeing's disastrous crewed test flight of its issues-laden Starliner spacecraft, the two women had to stay behind to make space for their stranded colleagues, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams. The duo have been stuck on board the ISS since June and had to wave their Starliner ride goodbye as it made its re-entry without them in September. Wilson, speaking during the same broadcast, emphasized that astronauts are always working for the same team, no matter if they are in space or on the ground. "We, of course, want to be together," she said of Crew 9. "We have built friendship and camaraderie, but I'm very excited for them. Haig and Gorbanov, looking forward to hearing their stories from space. Luckier than Cardman and Wilson, NASA astronaut Nick Haig and cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov occupied 2 out of the 4 seats on board the Crew Dragon. Like Genna Hammer, cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov has also not flown to space. Therefore, Crew 9 marked the first spaceflight in his career. Earlier, he was a backup for Alexander Grebenkin, who was to travel to the orbital station with the Crew 8 mission. First in space and the only cosmonaut on the mission, Gorbanov could not hide his feelings of pride.
Мне кажется, что когда человек выходит за пределы земной атмосферы, то он становится не только представителем своего государства или своей нации, но также представителем всего человечества. Больше занимаешься парапланеризмом, тем выше получается подняться на параплане. Соответственно, следующая ступень — космос, но без параплана.
By contrast, Nick Haig has been on 2 trips to the ISS, while his unlucky colleague, Wilson, flew to space on board 3 space shuttle missions between 2006 and 2010. Although they had flown into space many times before, this did not mean that their love for space had faded. Astronauts love space because they are astronauts. This explains why both Genna Hammer and Stephanie Wilson felt lost watching Dragon take off without them. They are astronauts and they love space seems to be an immutable truth, even though the microgravity environment in space is not a comfortable and safe environment for humans. Early in space missions, astronauts can disorientation, space motion sickness, and a loss of sense of direction, making completion of even basic tasks difficult. Nevertheless, according to some videos on YouTube showing real life in space, microgravity conditions are not very scary, are so fun instead. For example, you can play with your food without being afraid of them coming off.
Space makes eating a lot more fun. You can turn your spoon upside down, or even let it go, and nothing's gonna fall off.
Of course, such exciting experiences tend to strongly stimulate the imagination and desires of those of us who stay on the ground. Someone even left a funny comment. My mom punished me several times for dropping water and breaking glasses. I want to live there. The other said, you can turn your spoon and the food won't come off. Me tries it with school food. Food doesn't come off. Well, I'm in space. In addition, from a professional perspective, many astronauts are driven by a desire to explore the unknown. Space represents the final frontier for humanity, and being part of missions that push the boundaries of what is known is exhilarating. The thrill of venturing into an environment that is completely alien to human experience is a powerful motivator for many. The true impact of the overview effect is significant. From space, astronauts see a world with no borders. They see the paper-thin atmosphere that protects everything on our planet. Around it is the deadly vacuum of space. Most who have been to space return to Earth wanting to protect it more than ever. The environment, the people, the ecosystems. Earth is all we have. Astronauts report how fragile our planet looks from above. They come home with a new mindset. Some channel this into activism or art. This is something that those of us who have never been to space can't fully understand. Even for those who have flown in space, it can be difficult to communicate the life-changing experience. Nevertheless, the safety of the crew had to be prioritized. Cardman applauded NASA for prioritizing the safety of the crew and added that Williams and Wilmore were well-prepared professionals. The 2 stranded Starliner astronauts also said that they had no regrets about NASA's decision to extend their mission and to bring Starliner back to Earth without them, saying they had turned the page and were enjoying the transition to full-time space station astronauts. There's one thing that I try not to fret over, things that I can't control, Wilmore said, floating beside Williams in the station's Destiny Lab module. I'm not going to fret over it. There's no benefit to it at all. So my transition psychologically, maybe it wasn't instantaneous, but it was pretty close. If I can't affect it, if there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we can do. So we march forward, carry out the plan of the day. Williams agreed, saying, that's what we do. We're professionals. I have to say, though, in the back of my mind, there's folks on the ground who had some plans, right? Like my family, to spend some time with my mom. And I think I was fretting more about that. The things that we had sort of all talked about for this fall and this winter, Williams said. But you know what? Everybody is on board and is supporting us while we're up here. So I think that fret went away real quick. We're here, and we're going to be the best crewmates that we can be for our space station crewmates up here. Also, NASA appears to have no regrets about its decision to return the Boeing capsule without astronauts on board. I think we made the right decision to not have Butch and Suni on board, he said, given the uncertainties at the time about the performance of the thrusters. It's awfully hard for the team. It's hard for me. to sit here and have a successful landing and be in that position, but it was a test flight and we didn't have confidence in the certainty of the thruster performance. It's true, the spacecraft's propulsion system, provided by Aerojet Rocketdyne, clearly did not work as intended during the flight. As Starliner approached the space station in June, 5 of 28 control thrusters on Starliner's service module failed, forcing Wilmore to take manual control as ground teams sorted out the problem. Ground teams also detected 4 small helium leaks on Starliner's propulsion system soon after its launch, along with the one before launch. Although engineers recovered 4 of the 5 thrusters, this cannot able to convince NASA's decision makers that the same problem wouldn't reappear or get worse when Starliner returned. This shows the U.S. Space Agency's serious concerns about the performance of the Starliner's thruster. 2024's fourth quarter promises to be a wonderful time for NASA, SpaceX, and the whole space community. SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket will be fulfilling its manifest this year, which is inherently few in number due to the low demand on the market. On June 25th, the masculine rocket launched the GOES-U weather satellite. October 10th is scheduled to witness Falcon Heavy's second mission for the launch of the first mission to conduct a detailed science investigation of Jupiter's moon Europa. However, due to anticipated hurricane conditions in the area, the mission is stood down until Hurricane Milton passes. Unfortunately, this has the potential to be a historic hurricane for the west coast of Florida. On October 4th, workers transported NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft from the Payload Hazardous Servicing Facility at NASA's Kennedy Space Center to the SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket in the hangar as part of final launch preparations ahead of its journey to Jupiter's icy moon. While Europa Clipper's launch period opens on October 10th, the window provides launch opportunities until Wednesday, November 6th. Anyway, we all hope that this historic mission will be launched soon in October. This is a very special mission for the scientific community, which has been awaited for over 2 decades. Scientists predict Europa has a salty ocean beneath its icy crust that could hold the building blocks necessary to sustain life. NASA's Europa Clipper aims to fulfill this goal. The spacecraft will embark on a 5.5-year journey to investigate Europa's potential to harbor life through nearly 50 flybys. It will arrive at Jupiter in April 2030. According to NASA, they have invested up to $5 billion in total for this mission, making it one of NASA's most expensive planetary science missions. Because of its importance and cost, choosing a reliable yet inexpensive rocket should be a top priority. It is clever as the U.S. Space Agency has its eyes on Falcon Heavy rather than its SLS rocket. Initially, driven by congressional urging, NASA had planned to launch the spacecraft aboard its own Space Launch System, SLS, rocket. 2 primary factors fueled this decision. Firstly, lawmakers, particularly U.S. Senator Richard Shelby, sought to secure additional missions for the SLS rocket, bolstering its utilization and justifying its hefty investment. Secondly, the SLS's powerful capabilities promised to propel the Clipper to Jupiter in a mere 4 years, expediting the scientific exploration process. While the SLS presented a viable option, many within the scientific community strongly advocated for launching Europa Clipper on SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket. Their preference was driven by several compelling factors, with cost-effectiveness at the forefront. With prices ranging from $97 million to $150 million, NASA believes that a commercial launch like Falcon Heavy could save the agency over $1.5 billion, compared to using a Space Launch System rocket, which is at an estimated cost of over $2 billion per launch. Due to Europa Clipper's value and complexity, NASA required that vehicles have performed at least 3 successful launches, including at least 2 successful consecutive launches. Fortunately, by then, Falcon Heavy had flown 3 times, all successfully, although it hasn't launched since June 2019. NASA's SLS had its maiden launch delayed to 2022. Alternative vehicles with the performance required for the mission, such as Blue Origin's New Glenn, United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur, still stayed on the ground. Furthermore, launching on Falcon Heavy will reduce launch vibration, protecting the payload better. The SLS, a massive rocket, relied on 2 solid rocket boosters during launch, generating significant vibrations. SLS program officials had assured NASA leadership that the twisting load, a measure of the rocket's twist and shake, would be within acceptable limits. However, subsequent tests conducted by NASA revealed a startling reality. The actual twisting load was nearly double the SLS program's estimates. All those considerations prompted NASA to sign a $178 million contract with SpaceX in July 2021. To be honest, the vehicle selection phase is considered the easiest phase for NASA on this mission, because what comes after is much more difficult. There was a time when the U.S. Space Agency wrestled with the decision of whether to postpone the mission. Everything happened just a few months before the October schedule. In July, mission team members announced they discovered that Clipper's transistors, namely MOSFET's devices that control the flow of electricity on the probe, may not be as radiation hardened as they were believed to be. These power MOSFETs were acquired through Infineon's purchase of International Rectifier. The issue with the MOSFETs was brought to light in May, given that parts similar to Europa Clipper's transistors were failing at lower radiation doses than expected. This prompted Infineon to issue an alert in June 2024. Then engineers at NASA did tests on those transistors at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California, as well as at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, APL, and NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. The primary concern arose when it was discovered that some of the MOSFETs might not be able to withstand the extreme levels of radiation present in the Jupiter system. This originated from the fault of the supplier, Infineon. Some years ago, the company changed its manufacturing process for its radiation-hard MOSFETs, which is designed to meet U.S. military specifications, the same radiation resistance standards used by the Clipper team. After this change, the company's classified customers found that several lots of the transistors failed at lower than expected radiation levels. The company has already corrected the mistake, but Infineon did not report the flaw to NASA because the company did not know what the transistors would be used for. The discovery of Clipper's technical vulnerability at this late stage led to a big question about the feasibility of the October launch date. NASA cannot afford to delay the mission. If the delay happens, there are backup windows available for the next 2 years, but this would also require additional gravitational assists, potentially causing further delays. The 2024 launch follows a mega trajectory, or Mars-Earth gravitational assist, including a flyby of Mars in February 2025 and an Earth flyby in December 2026, before the spacecraft arrives at Jupiter in April 2030. If the mission launches a year late, it will need to include a second Earth flyby to adjust its trajectory rather than the Mars flyby. A launch in 2026 would revert to the original mega trajectory. Going around will make the mission take longer than expected, and that's not good. Therefore, to cope with the obstacles, the mission team worked to determine how many transistors may be susceptible and how they will perform in flight. NASA evaluated options for maximizing the transistor's longevity in the Jupiter system. Fortunately, on August 28th, NASA shared that Europa Clipper remains on track to hit its launch window that opens up on October 10th. It was also cleared of its transistor issue, which stemmed from determining if it could handle the intense levels of radiation around Jupiter. The statement stated the transistors would be able to support the baseline mission. Ultimately, after a bumpy journey, NASA has reached the goal of launching the Europa Clipper mission on time. It's such a big success for the national agency in particular, and the whole aerospace in general. The story of Europa Clipper began with the groundbreaking discoveries made by the Galileo spacecraft as it orbited Jupiter from 1995 to 2003. Galileo hinted at the existence of an ocean beneath the icy crust of Europa, Jupiter's intriguing moon. Intrigued by this possibility, NASA initiated the Europa Clipper mission as part of its solar system exploration program, driven by the profound question, could this subsurface ocean harbor the potential for life? The mission's objectives are as ambitious as they are scientifically significant. Europa Clipper will capture high-resolution images of Europa's surface, meticulously analyze its composition, search for signs of recent or ongoing geological activity, measure the thickness of the moon's icy shell, hunt for subsurface lakes, and determine the depth and salinity of Europa's hidden ocean. To achieve these goals, the spacecraft will embark on a remarkable journey, orbiting Jupiter and executing nearly 50 close flybys of Europa at altitudes ranging from 25 to 2,700 kilometers over a 3.5-year mission. Regarding its journey, It was announced in 2021 that the mission would take a 5.5-year trajectory to the Jovian system, using gravity assist maneuvers involving Mars in February 2025 and Earth in December 2026. The launch is targeted for a 21-day window between October 10th and 30th, aiming for an arrival date in April 2030. Backup launch dates have been identified for 2025 and 2026. In addition, conducting an important mission also reflects the worth value of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Powered by 9 Merlin 1D, generating more than 5 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, it is billed as the world's most powerful operational booster since NASA's Saturn V. With 70 meters in height and 3.7 meters in diameter, it consists of 3 modified, strapped-together first stages of SpaceX's workhorse Falcon 9 rocket. Contemporary rockets such as Russia's Soyuz are just 45.6 meters in height and 10.3 meters in diameter. Each launch of this masculine rocket attracts a huge of public attention, even though 6 years have passed since its first launch, and its number of launches so far is just counted on your fingers. Starship's 4th flight test ended in victory, attempting to go further than any previous test before and begin demonstrating central capabilities to return and reuse Starship and Super Heavy. That achievement made major strides to bring us closer to more ambitious objectives on its 5th flight. One of them being the likely return to the launch site landing of the Super Heavy booster, Booster 12. So, in preparation for the Super Heavy booster's first capture attempt, what modifications did SpaceX make to it? First of all, it's the Starlink terminals on the Chinese covering the co-PVS. They are redesigned with a square dish rather than the old circular dish. Additionally, the Chinese covering the CO2 tanks received the change. Booster 12 and onward features the new design on all 4 Chinese, consolidating to a singular design. Integrating Starlink with the Starship vehicle during its test flights provided some benefits as follows. It could enable connectivity and data transmission. During Starship's first fully integrated test flight, SpaceX equipped the vehicle with a Starlink antenna. This allowed Starlink to provide connectivity at record altitudes of over 123,600 feet and speeds of Mach 1.7, enabling SpaceX to communicate with the vehicle's systems and receive data during the 4-minute test flight. In the long term, this also serves for future Starlink deployment. SpaceX plans to use the Starship as the primary launch vehicle for deploying its next-generation Starlink Gen 2 satellite constellation. Integrating Starlink with Starship during test flights helps prepare for this future deployment, allowing SpaceX to test the systems and capabilities needed to rapidly launch and deploy Starlink satellites. Secondly, Booster 12 introduced a new design for engine shielding, with the removal of black material, giving the booster the shiny steel rim on the shielding. The black material wrapped around the base of the engine shielding. SpaceX has realized the importance of robust engine shielding on the Starship and Super Heavy booster to protect the launch pad and the engines themselves from the extreme conditions during launch. However, ditching the black material on the Flight 5 booster might show that the Raptor engines themselves are robust enough not to require the protective shield. This suits Elon Musk's previous announcement about the next-gen Raptor engine. I'm very excited about the next-gen Raptor engine that is robust enough not to require a heat shield. We'll also have more thrust, higher ISP, and many other improvements. So maybe we'll see the next version of the Raptor in Flight 5. Who knows? Thirdly, it's about the Flight Termination System, which is a critical safety system designed to terminate the flight of the vehicle if necessary during launch or ascent. A new FTS enclosure is added into Booster 12's liquid oxygen tank near the lateral supports for the liquid methane transfer tube. As you see, it has a new design compared to what is used on the fuel tank. On July 15th, those updates and the whole B-12 experienced a critical pre-flight test, static fire test. The 233-foot, 71 meters booster was rolled to the launch at SpaceX's test site on July 9th, ahead of the full-duration static test fire at the company's Starbase facility in Texas. With Super Heavy secured to the launch pad, the rocket's 33 Raptor engines fire at full thrust for about 20 seconds in video captured and shared by SpaceX in a post on X. One day after the test, or on July 16th, Booster 12 has been relocated into Mega Bay to get ready to wear her crown, the hot staging ring, the next time she comes out. In addition to Booster 12, let's take a look at its companion, Ship 30. payload is data. The data gathered from Flight 4 helps SpaceX to understand what should they do on Ship 30 to make it more reliable. The biggest weakness of Starship's upper stage is the heat shield. Perhaps we are all no strangers to the images showing the falling off and breaking apart of many heat shield tiles while the rocket performs its mission. To solve this problem, some of the heat shield tiles were removed to add a layer of ablative material, replacing the white insulation layer. This ablative material is only placed in areas that experience the highest temperatures during re-entry. In fact, ablative materials are a common choice for spacecraft heat shields, including NASA's Orion capsule and SpaceX's own Dragon spacecraft. It operates on the principle of ablative cooling, meaning it protects the spacecraft by absorbing and removing heat through the material's decomposition or burning. As the ablative layer encounters the scorching heat of re-entry, it melts and vaporizes, carrying away heat from the spacecraft's surface and reducing the temperature that reaches the underlying structure. This mechanism effectively minimizes the direct heat buildup on the Starship, but also consumes the ablative material in the process. That's why ablative heat shields are not designed for reuse. The new heat shield tiles, which will then be installed, are about twice as strong, or hopefully half as likely to crack or come off, as Elon revealed. However, this does not mean we can eliminate tile loss. In a recent conversation with Tim Dodd, Elon Musk mentioned that they are continuing to iterate on the tile mounting point. In fact, they're pretty sturdy, and if you want to remove one, you almost have to smash it out. Space exploration is always harsh and full of obstacles. Everything needs to be tested and improved. Totally understandable. With 18,000 tiles and around 54,000 attachment points subjected to intense vibrations and significant expansion, it's easy for the tiles to fall off. In the case the tiles work well, there should be no need for any replacement. After the fourth flight, Elon Musk also talked about Starship's material. Worth noting that the ship would have failed on re-entry if made of aluminum or carbon fiber, as they can't take the heat. Although carbon fiber is known for its high strength and light weight, SpaceX found stainless steel to be more feasible and advantageous for their spacecraft. In a detailed discussion with Adam Burrows of Princeton University, Musk explained why stainless steel was chosen over carbon fiber. Initially, SpaceX experimented with advanced carbon fiber, but faced significant challenges. Musk highlighted the material's porous nature and flammability, especially troublesome given the pressurized cryogenic methane and hot oxygen gases used in the Starship, which required a lining that compromised carbon fiber's mass efficiency. The Starship's large 9-meter diameter presented another challenge, requiring precise application of 60 to 220 carbon fiber layers, depending on the tank section. Any imperfections, like bubbles or leftover separator sheets, would jeopardize the entire structure. Faced with these obstacles, SpaceX explored alternative materials. The company had previously used an aluminum-lithium alloy in its Falcon 9 rockets, but found it to be too expensive at around $40 per kilogram and difficult to weld. The search led to stainless steel, particularly the 300 series, which Musk noted for its remarkable cryogenic properties. At liquid oxygen temperatures, stainless steel's strength increases without becoming more brittle, a critical advantage since both fuel and oxygen on board are cryogenically chilled. Moreover, stainless steel's ease of welding and affordability, costing roughly $4 per kilogram, made it an attractive option. Musk further explained stainless steel's role in reducing the need for extensive heat shielding during re-entry. While carbon fiber's strength diminishes beyond 200 degrees Celsius, stainless steel can withstand temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. This resilience allows for a lighter heat shield, as its mass correlates with the temperature transmitted to the rocket's hull. Musk also pointed out that the choice of stainless steel for the construction of the Starship spacecraft negates the need for paint, which can add significant weight to the structure, especially considering its substantial 9-meter diameter. Further emphasizing the material's benefits, Musk revealed that the decision to utilize ultra-hard, cold-rolled stainless steel for the Starship was a pivotal factor in choosing the same material for the manufacturing of Tesla's Cybertruck. SpaceX's material innovation journey began with stainless steel 301, which, despite its merits, revealed issues at cryogenic temperatures. The company then transitioned to stainless steel 304 and ultimately developed its proprietary alloy, designated 30X, surpassing the performance of both 301 and 304. And that just about wraps it up for today's episode. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.